Well, hi, everybody. I decided this year I was going to kick off 2024 with a video that has been requested in different forms, and I thought would be a great way to sort of approach the new year. And that is how to adaptively plan when you're chronically ill. It's kind of what I'm going with here. It's a more nebulous concept, but let me give you some context. So, I'm chronically ill. For those of you who don't know, I am in kidney failure. I have polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic kidney disease. I'm in kidney failure, and as of the filming of this video, I do home hemodialysis 5 days a week. That for me, this last year, I've been on dialysis almost exactly a year at this point, and I went into this year utterly miserable in kidney failure this last year. Utterly miserable in kidney failure. And then I started dialysis, started to feel better, thought I was going to be a superhero. And then reality set in that A, I'm still really sick, and B, on its own, kidney failure messes with how I plan my life, but add in dialysis, which is like a job in and of itself. And my life is really difficult sometimes to manage. I also have two young adult teenagers. How do I refer to my kids? My oldest is in community college, still lives at home, struggles with their own physical and mental health problems, and then my son is in his last semester of his senior year. I have a husband, I have pets, I have a house. I've got all the things. I've got a life. We all have lives. They all look very different, but we all have obligations and we all have things that we need to do and we all have things that we want to do. Whether you are chronically ill, whether you are dealing with like an acute illness, whether you are dealing with mental illness, it can be really hard to plan your life. It can be hard to plan your day, your week, whatever, and actually follow through on it in a way that doesn't feel demoralizing. When you're sick, and I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of you. When you're sick, shit changes all the time. Your energy levels change, your pain levels change, your executive function abilities change. You have to work around doctor's appointments. You have to work around medication schedules. The world is not a kind place to those of us who have these sorts of struggles. If it was, we would likely be able to kind of get through our lives riding the waves of good days and bad days and appointments and no appointments and things like that. But that's not where we live. At least here in the US, we are in a capitalist hellscape that is focused on productivity and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and being effective and being the best you that you can be. And all of these ideals are pervasive. They are in everything that we do. There's so much value put on how much we produce that when you are sick, when you struggle with chronic conditions especially, and this is your life, it can be really easy to A, feel that outside pressure and feel like you're not good enough, and B, start to put that pressure on yourself. All of this to say, while the world tends to put us in a place where meaning is derived from how much we produce, especially when you go on the internet and you see all of like the productivity gurus and the people who, like, mostly dudes who tell you how to hack your life, how to hack your productivity. I cannot with this. And I recognize I'm a planner person. I do planner videos on the internet, and I'm somebody who sometimes comes across as getting a lot done despite how I feel. Some of that is because I am not very good at recognizing my limits, and so I put myself into, like, I do things that are not good for me when it comes to how much I'm productive. Some of that is because I have learned some tricks, not to hack it, but ways to approach my life in a way that is more reasonable for the situation that I'm in. And that's why I wanted to make this video. You don't have to be physically sick to benefit from this video. Most of this video is going to be in the context of chronic illness and to some degree mental illness. I have much more experience with chronic illness. I do struggle with some anxiety, but it's not a very pervasive thing, and it's mostly due to my chronic illness. And I'm on medication for it and it's helping. But my kid deals with both very strongly. So I do have some experience there. However, if you don't feel like I am mentioning you in your situation in this video, just adapt it the best you can if you want to. But that's the perspective I'm coming from here. The first thing that I think can be really helpful. And these are in no particular order, except for this particular one. This one I think is good to sort of understand at the beginning, but the rest of these, the order doesn't matter. What do they say in Whose Line Is It Anyway? The points don't matter. But this one I think is important to kind of have at the forefront of your mind, and that is to think about what motivates you. The reason I say this is an important starting point is because you are going to have days. We all have them. And if you're chronically ill, you have them probably more often than you'd like to admit. That there are days we just getting out of bed feels like the most triumphant thing that we're going to do that day. Now, some of you know I am not a fan of Rachel Hollis. This point right here is the reason I'm the reason I started hating on her in the first place. Before she wrote Girl Wash Your Face, before any of that, when she was just putting videos out on the internet, she had a video out where she saw something on Pinterest that said that sometimes just getting out of bed is a win or something like that. And she went on this entire tirade about how, no, that's bullshit. You need to strive for higher than that. And I was so angry when I saw that, because that is some of the most ableist bullshit I have seen. Maybe, there's plenty more ableist bullshit, but that was ableist to a point of turning my stomach to understand you have never really been sick before, have you? There have been days where just getting out of bed, brushing my teeth, putting on different pajamas and getting back into bed, or not even bothering to put on different pajamas, felt like I had moved a mountain. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it sucks if you're in that position, but don't let people make you feel less than if that is the thing you need to celebrate. The reason I'm saying to think about what motivates you is because you need to have a toolkit of things that you can use, ways to celebrate, ways to acknowledge that maybe that day or those things you did that to anybody else feels like basic maintenance, but to you was like climbing a mountain. You need to find ways to acknowledge that to yourself so that you can celebrate them even in a tiny way. Because otherwise it can be really easy to fall into that trap of, oh God, I was just lazy that day. Aside from laziness being one of the, like, in a capitalistic society, being one of the, like, fucking cardinal sins, sloth, right? Aside from the fact that I think that's bullshit, that being lazy is one of my fucking favorite pastimes. Like, I like being lazy. Sometimes when I'm lazy, I actually feel like it takes effort to be lazy because of the way my brain is wired. But, like, there's nothing wrong with being fucking lazy. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're sick. You need to have ways to remind yourself that you were doing the best that you could, that you weren't being lazy. You were doing the best that you could. Is it gold stars or stickers? Is it a check mark? Is it having a reward that you work your way up to? Like, if I brush my teeth on all of these days when I'm having really bad dysfunction, like executive dysfunction, do I get something cool? Or do I get to do something cool? How do you motivate it? For me, checking things off hella motivates me in like a silly but yet satisfying way. Checking things off, crossing them off, etc. We'll talk more about this later. The important thing is to have those ideas of what will remind you of your triumphs, no matter how small, to help you feel better and not so down on yourself. That is really important. So keep that in mind. That's the first thing to do, is to just have that in the back of your mind so that you can utilize it later. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and this is where we're getting into the demonstration. I feel like I've been rambling with my hands for quite some time here, is to embrace the weekly to-do list. Now, this is something that I myself have a lot of struggles with. This is a realization I really came to this year, was the weekly. I've done it before when I was bullet journaling, but somehow this past year, I thought that making my list each day would help me, and it just demoralized me. I started to realize, because it was when I plan my day out, whether it's at the start of the week, and I've done that before where I've started my week off. Here's my Moxie life from this year, where I'd start my week off and I would go through and I'd start making my lists of this. None of these are a good example. I never went and looked for a good example week. Maybe I should have done that, where I'll go ahead of time and I'll make my lists at the start of the week when I'm planning, because that's what I used to do even when I was sick, but I was not so sick that I couldn't muscle my way through it. which is not a good thing. 10 out of 10 don't recommend. But that's just been my way of doing things for most of my life. So when I was sick, I would plan my week out. And I would start listing things on each day that I wanted to get done. And then I'd have a bad day. And so some of those things would get booted forward. And then I'd have a bad day. And some of those things, my list would start getting more and more out of control. And I would feel bad about myself because remember how I said checking things off motivates me? The opposite is true when I don't check things off. Trying to plan out at the start of a week what I can get done on any given day is counterintuitive to being sick in the first place and not being able to predict. Is today going to be a high pain day? Is today going to be a day where dialysis takes it out of me? Is today going to be a day where I'm going to be able to kick ass and take care of all sorts of things? I have no idea. There's some things I can predict, and I'm sure with a lot of you, with whatever you're dealing with, that you can predict. Like if you are somebody who struggles with the seasonal affective disorder, you probably know when we start hitting like the week of solstice, you might not be able to get a lot done that week. There are some days where I'm at the doctor's all day for clinic visits. I know for a fact that the next day I will likely not be able to get a lot done because I'm going to be wiped out. You can sometimes predict those things, but you can't always predict the fucking mundaneness of feeling like shit. So the suggestion for here is to embrace a weekly to-do list, because that way you're not assigning things to a specific day. You just know these are the things for this week and I will do them as I am able to. First would be to brain dump. Just start yammering out all of the things this week that you need to get done. Have a scrap paper, have a post-it note, have a notebook you just use for brain dumps. I know some people who will take like a bullet journal or like a Hobonichi style book, and they'll be doing their daily shit in the front of the book, but in the back of the book, they'll start on the back page and brain dump and then work their way in with the brain dump. So they're kind of working both directions. I would do that, except I would totally forget I was doing that. So as an example, in this week that we're going into when I'm filming this, and we're going to talk about prioritization and things like that and how that can come into play in a little bit, but that would be your first step. And then you just place it on whatever list you want to do. Now, you could do something that I think I'm going to do for right now, which is just use a sidebar or something if you've got a weekly layout. This is one way to do it, is to put it onto a weekly to-do list. And then as you go through your week, you can move them to that day if you think you're going to get them done that day, or if you did get them done that day, which is something I might even more recommend. That way you have it all in one spot. The other thing is what's called the Alistair method. It's a bullet journaling thing. Plant-Based Bride calls it the rolling weekly. And you could do this, especially if you have like the space, like you have a Hobonichi or you have a bullet journal or something where you have daily pages and like extra space. And what you could do for that is you just draw a line, and then you draw a vertical line. And then over here, you put your days of the week, Monday through Friday or Sunday. And then over here, you write your task. So for example, if one of them for me was put inventory away, meaning my dialysis supplies that got inventory, can I spell? And we'll put mortgage here, and then we'll put figure out lidocaine. These are not all my tasks, but we're just going to do a couple of them for the sake of demonstration when we get to the next point. But you can put your tasks here, and then the basic idea is that you just check the day that those get done, so that you have a visual cue as to when you got things done, but you don't have any assignments at the beginning of the week necessarily. This just gives you a little bit more flexibility to work around those bad days. And so when the days you're feeling better, you have an easy way to see the stuff that needs to get done. The next thing to embrace, whether you use this method, whether you use a weekly to-do list, whether you still put things on days and you want them to be done. I know some people will put their lists on days during the week because of their weekly layout, but it's not that they're assigned to that day. They're just putting them wherever there's space. I think Mary Ellen from Plan with Bumble does that. One thing that I find really helpful when I am trying to be adaptive in my planning, as well as reminding myself when I've got things done. And also, I have a lot of brain fog from kidney disease. A lot of the times when you're sick, your brain is full of a lot of things, but it may not be the things you need to be remembering. So one way to help yourself with that is to utilize a key, a notation system, something. I pulled this from bullet journaling as well, but it's been very helpful for me because, I often will start things and then not have the energy to finish them, but I also may not have the brain power to remember what I've started and what I finished. And I don't want to fill my planner up with a bunch of like random scribbles that I can't decipher. So one thing that's really helpful is being able to tell at a glance kind of where you are on certain things. Now, my suggestion is if you are in a space like I am with a brain that's just all over the place, to not overcomplicate things. You can go online and Google like bullet journal key and find all sorts of examples. I can't keep up with that shit. So I have a very basic one that I use. And it actually could come into play with the rolling weekly or on the weekly task list or on regular tasks. So for me, a bullet, I'm going to zoom you in so you can see a little bit better. So for me, a bullet just means a task. It could also mean an event. Some people do circles for events. Fucking, I don't care. Usually for me, it's just a bullet is like an item. Does that make sense? Doesn't really matter. Event. I don't care. Anything. That's for me is a bullet. Okay? So then, if I have started something, but I haven't finished it, usually I will just do 1 slash, like the half of an X. I'll put progress is maybe a good way to say that. I have made progress on that item, but I haven't finished it, which means when I finish something, I cross it off. And then if I'm not going to do something, if I nope it out, if I yeet it out, and we'll talk more about that in a minute too, I just cross it. That's it. So on a weekly layout, maybe get that other bookmark. I never use my bookmarks, but like today's a bookmark day. My weekly layout, that could look like, maybe I started putting my inventory away, but I haven't actually gotten through it yet. And I went to Costco and I started the process of figuring out why my lidocaine, I'm actually in this process right now, why my prescription is being all wonky with the pharmacy, and I paid my mortgage. I also decided that this is not the week to do my gallery wall, so I crossed it off. I knew I wasn't gonna. I've gotten to like Thursday, and I haven't even started it yet, and I know I'm not gonna have the energy. So this could give you a look at a glance. I can see what I've done, what I'm working on, and what I have decided to knock off until the next week. Now, some people will use to like migrate to the next week. I can read my fucking writing. I can decide if I want to migrate it or not. I don't really care. I'm not thinking about next week. I'm thinking about this week. When I go over my week at the end of the week and I see what I didn't get done, then I might decide to move it to the next week when I brain dump. But honestly, I don't give a shit right now. That's next week. I'm dealing with today. The issue with doing it in a column like this is unless you're writing down what you did each day, you won't necessarily know when you did this. That may matter to you. That may not. If it does matter to you, then a rolling weekly is a better idea. Because then here, let's say I started putting my inventory away on Tuesday. I paid my mortgage on Monday. And I started working on the lidocaine on Wednesday. And then on Friday, cross that, I finished putting my inventory away. Another way you can do that is if you have a project you're working on all week on the rolling weekly, like inventory. I still can't spell. What the fuck? And I have been working on it all week, so I put a line to the day that I finish it. That's the way some people do it. That gives you an idea of how you've been working on things. And again, if there was something like gallery wall that I decided to fuck off with for the next week, you can cross that out, or you can put an arrow to the next week if you want to make a note of migrating it. It's your call. The point being is that this just gives you an overview so you can see not only what you did, like what you finished, but what you've worked on. That can help motivate you. That also can help you kind of keep an eye, like, do you really want to start another project if you haven't finished this one? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. The key just gives you a way to see things at a glance. I also will use these same notations on, like if I put a to-do list item on a day, and I'll use them if I'm doing like a dot pen, which I also do fairly often. I'll just use the dot instead of a bullet and do the exact same stuff with it because I like using dot pens. The point being is that you can utilize this as a way to kind of get a better idea without having to put too much effort into how you're tracking things. Okay, we're going to go back to my list because another tip I have for you is to prioritize your list, but I don't use a lot of the systems that are out there. There's like the Eisenhower matrix and all of these other ways where you can sort and categorize and everything else. Usually that is just too much brain power. Now you might say, well, Cindy, you have to use the brain power anyway. Yeah, but sometimes it comes down to like micro bits of brain power, and something like the Eisenhower matrix is just too much of a pain in the ass. So I like to just go with the let's be an old lady and use the fun kids slang and say yes, yes, or yeet. All right. So all I do for this is I just grab the same pen I was using and a highlighter. You don't have to use a highlighter. You could circle, but whatever. So yes, yes is what you need to do. That has to get done. Sometimes it just has to be done that week, but it is on the top of your priority list. Yes is what you want to do. Things that are not required this week, but you really want to do them. And then yeet are the things you don't need to get done this week, or you can delegate to someone. Now, a note on delegation. The ability to delegate is entirely helpful to somebody who is sick, but it is also something that is an extreme privilege. You may not have the financial resources to delegate something to, say, a house cleaner or another service you can pay for. You may not have the support network to be able to delegate to a spouse or to a sibling or to your kid or to whoever. You may not have any of that. You may not be able to delegate because you don't have that in place. So many of these hacking productivity people are like, just outsource. Not everybody can do that. I would argue a lot of people can't do that. If there is something that you really need to yeet off of your list that you should delegate, but you don't have anyone to delegate to, fucking yeet it. Just yeet it off the list, come back to it again, and see if maybe this time you can fit it in or not. Just do it. And don't worry about it. You don't always have to dust your fucking baseboards. Sometimes you can't vacuum because you don't have it in you. You know what I mean? Like, if it's something that, like, yeah, it might suck a little to not do it, but you can get by with it, fucking yeet it if you have to. Be ruthless. So the way I do this, I make it, and I go by my gut. I don't do things, I don't ponder because, like I said, I have limited brain power. I have limited energy. All I want to do is just get through my list quickly. So I got my pen. I got my highlighter. I want to go through this list and I'm going to highlight everything that is a yes, something I need to do. I need to pay my mortgage. I need to go to Costco because we need some stuff very specifically. And I could delegate that and do Instacart or whatever. But whenever I Instacart Costco, like, I could afford to do that. But whenever I do it, they fuck it up. And I just don't want to deal with that right now. And there are things I have to get from. And I have to figure out the lidocaine situation. Those have to get done. What can I yeet off of my list? I can yeet finishing the gallery wall, so I'm going to cross that off my list. And I can yeet putting the Christmas decor away because I don't actually need to do that this week. And I want to, but I really don't need to. And if I have low energy, that can get yeeted. What do I want to do? Put away inventory, wash towels. I'm just going to leave those on there because they are things that don't have to get done this week, but I really want to get them done. As a matter of fact, getting the inventory put away would make doing the gallery wall and the Xmas decor easier. So this is a higher priority for me. And the washing of the towels, I have an extra set of towels, so I don't need to wash them. But I really want to, because if I don't, next week I will need to wash 2 sets of towels. So I'm going to keep that on the list. So I have these items here. And so when I put them on my to-do list, I will put these highlighted ones at the top and then these ones underneath. That way, I know which ones are the higher priority. And if any of them have a specific date they need to be done by, then I will make a star by that, and I'll either put it on my daily to-do list, or I'll make sure to put a dot on whatever day I know I need to pay it in my rolling weekly, so that I know that that's coming. Prioritization is really helpful, but it's important to just work quickly, to not overthink it, and to remember that just because you want to do something doesn't mean it has to get done, and just because it has to get done doesn't mean it has to get done on a specific day, unless it really has to, like a mortgage. Another tip for adaptive planning is to utilize what it is that motivates you. We already talked about that. So for me, for example, I might have a habit tracker over here with like Monday through Sunday or whatever, and then write in my habits and then cross them off as I do them. But for me, one thing that motivates me is checking things off. And so for a really important habit or a really important thing I need to do each day, it's better for me to do a checkbox on each day and check it off. So for me, it would be meds. I have to take my meds every day, twice a day. But I still, because of my brain fog and everything else, I still miss them from time to time. So having a checkbox in the morning and in the evening for morning and evening meds, if I see it physically on my planner and have to check it off, I will be more motivated and more reminded than having it on a habit tracker. This is not something I set out to do. This is just something I have sort of come to terms with as I think about myself. And that is that habit trackers for me are much more of a want, and things that I have to check off, habits I put on each day, are more of a need. Does that make sense? That's just how my brain sorts them. It's not by something I decide to do on purpose. It's just sort of how my mind works. Knowing that, I lean into that. I'll put on my habits the things I am trying to get better at, the things I am working towards, my personal goals, if you will. Whereas on the days of, if I need to check off taking my meds or giving meds to my dog, she's dealing with some allergies right now, that motivates me. Incorporate that into your planning. To give you another example, my oldest has a lot of executive function struggles that go along with both their physical issues with their joints and their extreme major depressive disorder. They are really motivated by getting like stickers on a chart. Gold stars was kind of where we started, but then I ran out of gold stars, but I have about 1 million planner stickers. So I just gave them sheets of like samplers and things that I wasn't going to use. And we just put those on there. We use that. We have a chore chart, like sticker chart thing that we got, that they can put stickers on each day every time they handle certain aspects of their hygiene and like daily upkeep things that for somebody who doesn't deal with executive function struggles, they may be like, why do you need a sticker because you brushed your teeth or took a shower? But if you've struggled with major depressive disorder, then you know that hygiene is one of the first places that being depressed can show its ugly head. And by putting the stickers down, it motivates them to keep doing these things and get back into the rhythm of it. So we leaned into that. We gave them a stickers chore chart, and that has helped them stay on top of certain aspects of their hygiene that go as soon as they start, because they also, we think, have PMDD, and when that starts to kick in, their hygiene goes downhill. When they have a depressive episode, that goes downhill. When they have a really rough pain day, that starts to go downhill. It's the first thing to go. And so by having the sticker chart, it both gives them something that motivates them and shows us patterns. So for me, like I said, a daily checkbox, more motivating than a habit tracker. And so that's really important for me, both for things that I need to stay on top of, like taking my meds, and for individual things like taking my car in for an oil change. That's what motivates me. So utilize what motivates you in your planner, even if you think it's silly to do it for showering or to do it for brushing your teeth or something like that. Fuck anybody who treats you like less because that's something you need to do to motivate yourself. Put it in there because they're not the ones who have to deal with you being unshowered. You are. So fuck them. Do it the way that motivates you because that will be the most helpful. Now, the next thing I'm going to bring up here, kind of the last practical tip. I have 2 tips left. This is the last practical tip. It's not really planner related. It's phone related. Most of us have a smartphone. We don't all have a smartphone. But for those of us who do, fucking use your smartphone. You can use a Google Calendar or another calendar to send you alerts. That's what I do because I need to write, I'm a paper and pen kind of person. I need to write things down. As a matter of fact, this year I'm starting to write things in my calendar again because I have discovered that by just keeping things in a Google Calendar, I don't remember them as clearly. I need to write them down to reinforce it because of my brain fog. However, one thing I have set up with my Google Calendar is for my events, it will remind me half an hour ahead of time and then 10 minutes ahead of time. That has saved me a couple of times. Set those alerts up if you need those. Alarms. My kid, big on alarms. Alarms to take their meds. Alarms to when to take a shower. Alarms to when to just certain alarms to throughout the day to remind them to check what they're doing and see if they need to redirect because they can fixate really hard on certain things that they're working on. Use your phone for those things. Use your phone because if you carry it on you at all times, like most of us do, having your phone screech at you when you need to get something done is a way to kind of snap you out of whatever you're doing and make you stop and think about it. I also will send myself text messages if I need to remember something and I'm not near a piece of paper to write down, or if I know I'm in a place that day where if I write something down on a piece of paper, I still might not remember it. Things like that. Just use your phone to the best of your ability in tandem with everything else that you're doing to just help stay ahead of the confusion and the fog and the malaise that tends to happen a lot when you're sick. And then finally, my last tip, and this is not an exhaustive list. This is not an exhaustive list at all. But the most important thing to remember is to be kind to yourself. For the love of God, be kind to yourself. Like I said in the beginning, we are in a capitalist hellscape. This world is not built to support people who struggle with illness, mental or physical, people who are disabled, people who are not able bodied moving through the world. This world is not built for us. And so if the world is not going to be kind to you, then don't be a fucking dick to yourself. Don't join in the fun. Fuck Rachel Hollis. If you got out of bed that day, maybe that's you doing the best that you can that day. So don't be hard on yourself. Find ways to pump yourself up and to stay on top of things using your planner. But when it doesn't happen, don't dog on yourself, because all that's going to do is lead to more dogging and more spiraling. And we don't need that. Nobody needs that. You don't need that in your life. That's the energy if we're going to yeet something out of 2023 and move into 2024, it's being a dick to yourself about things when you have no reason to be. So don't. The world isn't kind. That doesn't mean you can't be. Those are some of my thoughts on going into 2024, being adaptive and how you plan if you're sick. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you liked this video. I feel like it was a little rambly, but I just had a lot of feelings. If there's videos like this you'd like to see coming up in the new year. And also, if you have any tips for being adaptive with your planning, let us know in the comments, because as many things as I have learned, I am not a fucking repository of information. And I know there's a lot of you with a lot of really good ideas. I know my entire audience is not people who are sick, but I know there's a lot of you who are, whether mentally, physically, or both. So let us know in the comments your best tips. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, friends, peace.